as well as the acting DDG in the teacher branch. I'm going to Are we ready there? We can go. So if you are rebooting, maybe we must wait for you as other colleagues are also working in. We don't want you to miss anything. It's a very important briefing. Just indicate when you're ready so we can go. Do we have Batabile with the, or is it you? You'll be doing the WhatsApp. All right, thank you. I was using the information you gave me. You've changed it, but it's fine. Technology is doing its own thing there.
Yes, yes. Coming up the minutes now.
Yeah. Really? All right, we'll wait. This one.
Yeah, this one. Oh, is it on?
This one's. Yeah. Yeah, we'll wait. I'm sure they're still doing the headlines and top stories and stuff. Yeah, live on top stories. Okay, if we are live, let me say that we are 26 days to the start of the National Senior Certificate Examinations. That's a very important message. And we urge all communities to support the learners as they prepare. Are we good now? All right, thanks very much. Yeah, Minister, are we ready? I'm going to ask you to please come to address us and also advise in terms of the flow of the presenters after you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elijah. Good morning, colleagues. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. It's very important for me to come and brief not only members of the media, but I think South Africans in general regarding the harsh reality that our education system is under immense financial pressure. It's no secret that in the recent weeks, several provincial departments of education have been vocal regarding the budget pressures that they are currently facing. And these pressures are not just a recent occurrence, but they have been years in the making due to aggressive budget cuts, economic stagnation, fiscal management across government, mismanagement across government, which is now affecting our frontline services. These budget pressures are not just numbers on spreadsheets, but they translate to fewer teachers, reduced textbooks, fewer admin support staff, which means that teachers spend more time on admin work, thereby reducing learning and teaching time. In essence, the very fabric of our children's future is now under threat if we continue in this current trajectory. In provinces like the Western Cape, we've already seen the decision to reduce the basket of teaching purse for 2025, a move that may result in fewer educators in classrooms. This may mean larger class sizes, reduced individual attention for learners, and ultimately a risk to the achievement of quality education outcomes. Unfortunately, the other provinces throughout the country are also in similar positions, which with many desperately trying to find ways to avoid having to top slice their budgets for key services like textbooks provisions, like admin support or scholar transport programs. The Deputy Minister and I have been in constant engagement with the provinces to support them during this challenging time. We have committed ourselves to doing everything we can to stabilize the system and have appealed to provinces to retain the basket of posts that they currently have in order for us to not affect the frontline services or compromise the education outcomes that we desperately want to improve. We must also appreciate the work that the provinces have done around the clock to help the sector stabilize and to get to grips with these challenges. I have witnessed MECs working tirelessly with their provincial departments to protect teaching and learning in our schools. We are faced with a pending national crisis, one that affects not just learners, but our teachers, our principals, and broader communities. It's crucial that we understand that this crisis is not confined to just one province or one aspect of the education sector, but it is wide-spreading. Provincial education departments will, in the next 2 to 3 years, find it increasingly difficult to fund their existing basket of posts and existing programs within their available budget, unless we take measures to proactively mitigate this risk. Let me make an example. For the 2025-2026 year, 4 provincial departments will battle to cover their budgets. For the 2026-2027 financial year, 5 provinces will battle to cover their budgets. For 2027 and 2028 financial year, 7 provinces will be unable to afford their budgets. So several provinces have preserved the same basket of posts for the past 3 academic years, despite the fact that learner numbers are increasing, while other provinces have decreased the purse in the past 3 years. It is important that when we're talking about the retention of posts or decreased posts, we mean that these have been cut in posts and not in warm bodies. So let me explain, meaning that no person or teacher is retrenched, but it means that often posts or vacancies that appear or that come into the system are then not filled. And this is an important distinction because often people are saying teachers are being retrenched. But ultimately, where there are vacancies, we must fill them in order for us to protect the system. Nationally, the number of learners within the education system have increased by approximately 292,000 over the last 5 years. That's almost 300,000 increase in learners that we've seen over the last 5 years. And so we're also seeing now, as a result, learner and educator ratios which are steadily increasing across the provinces. Now, it's important to retain a manageable learner and educator ratio, because that means that we are able to make sure that the quality of outcomes is looked after. Once your ratios are big and your class sizes are bigger, we are unable to guarantee that we will have the same amount of quality of outcomes that we need. So an increase in learner numbers without increasing the post basket may affect the quality of teaching, which will be reflected in the performance of the system. Largely, the financial constraints have had the largest impact on educator provisioning, leading to a steady increase in the learner and educator ratios, as I've indicated. Most provincial departments require between 350 million to 3.8 billion over the medium-term expenditure framework to fully fund their respective posts. So those are large numbers that we are saying, as a sector, we need this money over the medium-term expenditure framework in order for us to be able to fund educators in the system. If we continue down the path of regressing or underfunding the sector, the projections indicate that most provincial departments will not be able to maintain their respective basket of posts. To fully grasp why we are here, and more importantly, how we got here, we must look back and acknowledge that as government, we have not made the right decisions at the right time, which has brought us to this point. First and foremost, our economy has been stagnant for almost a decade. Growth rates have remained below 1% in real terms, which is far below what is needed to generate sufficient tax revenue to fund public services, including education. Without a growing economy, government revenues shrink, and when government revenues shrink, so do our budgets. So South Africa needs a robust, dynamic, and growing economy to generate the revenue that is required to fund public services like the education sector. We must adopt and implement economic policies that prioritize growth, and we must wholeheartedly support Operation Vulindlela, which aims to do just this. Moreover, our spending priorities need realignment in government. Between 2013 and 2023, the government spent 331 billion rand bailing out state-owned enterprises. This figure is staggering, especially when you consider the opportunity cost, because we could have funded our education sector, our healthcare sector, and economic infrastructure. Instead, this was funneled to SOEs at the tune of 331 billion. The other issue that has led us here is wasteful expenditure and corruption, which has hollowed out our state coffers. Between 2014 and 2023, South Africa has lost an estimated 1.5 trillion rand in economic value to corruption, money which again could have been used to build schools, pay teachers, improve learning conditions. Instead, it was used to line the pockets of a few. In addition to all of these things, over the past 15 years, our public sector salary increases have consistently outpaced inflation, with some years seeing an increase as high as 8 to 10%. While we must always make sure that we fairly compensate our public servants, these above inflation increases have rendered the public wage bill completely unaffordable and accounting for nearly 35% of government spending. So, colleagues, in response to the crisis that is facing particularly the education sector, I have convened 2 special meetings of the Council of Education Ministers. These meetings have brought together MECs from across the country, and we've conducted a thorough analysis of the budget challenges that each and every province faces. For the first time in a decade, we now have a clearer picture of where the most significant budget pressures are and how do we engage Treasury to try and buttress those. And so as a result, I have also requested an urgent meeting with the Minister of Finance to discuss the matter further. I am grateful to Minister Godongwana for his cooperation and support on this important matter. We are also grateful and appreciative to Treasury's willingness to engage with the education sector. Ultimately, a solution must be found in order for us to protect frontline services. In addition, I've also requested the convening of a political 10 by 10 meeting, which is a meeting that is co-chaired by the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Basic Education, the 10 provincial departments of education, and the 10 provincial treasury departments. Again, this is designed so that we can work together and find solutions. First, immediate solutions to try and salvage the situation, but also we need to look at longer term solutions on how do we make sure that we protect the critical services that we need in our schools. And so yes, the budget crisis right now may be the provisioning of posts, but believe you me, in no time it will start to encroach on goods and services. It will encroach on the provision of LTSM learning materials like textbooks. And so we've got to do everything in our power to protect frontline services as much as we can. On a longer term, we need to make sure that we are fixing the economy, which is critical for our education. Education is not just another expenditure, it's an investment in the country's future. So a well-educated population is the very foundation of a prosperous and innovative economy. Without it, we cannot hope to address the unemployment crisis or compete in the global economy. In the long term, we must prioritize the following. We must prioritize increased investment in education to receive a larger share of the national budget, ensuring that we have enough teachers, quality infrastructure, and adequate resources. We must also make sure that we focus on teacher development to make sure that we are upskilling our teachers. We must make sure that we are also investing in technology in education so that as we enter the digital age, our learners are not left behind. And we must invest in the appropriate infrastructure, eradicate unsafe infrastructure such as pit latrines. This is absolutely critical as we're prioritizing, because in a shrinking environment where we've got shrinking financial resources, we have to make sure that we are prioritizing. Ladies and gentlemen, our education system is the very bedrock of our nation's future. While we face significant challenges, these are not insurmountable. It's very important to remember that these are big challenges that are facing the sector, but they're not insurmountable. If we work together as government across the departments, we can find solutions. And that's why I'm appreciative of the Minister of Finance's willingness to engage us. I'm appreciative of the MSC's willingness to open their books so that we, as the team here at DBE, can have a thorough analysis of what it is that we are looking at. But I also want to thank our stakeholders, such as the teacher unions, that I have also sought to engage and update on where we are with this crisis. I would also like to also thank the ELRC for their cooperation and support always in this matter. And so as I conclude, it's important to note that yes, these are big challenges, but we have to find short-term solutions and longer-term solutions, and we can do so. But we have to make sure that whatever we do, we protect the frontline services, which is making sure that our teachers and our schools are looked after. Now I'm going to ask Mr. Faker to come through, and he's going to explain to us how teacher provisioning works, what the process is, and he'll be followed by the CFO. Thanks, Elijah.
Thank you, Minister. Good morning to everybody. The process of the post provisioning consists actually of two steps. And as the legislation is in terms of deployment of actually educators, in terms of the Educators Act, it's basically whereby once the budget actually has been received, and that's actually very important. Once the budget has been received by the Provincial Education Department, the MECs for education need to identify actually a basket of posts. And that is in terms of the affordability, in terms of actually how many posts they can afford in that regard. Secondly, once that particular process actually has been finalized, the head of education then needs to distribute those posts. That is in terms of how many posts, for example, for the primary schools, secondary schools, and the Elson schools in that regard, if I can use that as being an example. But most importantly, actually, the process is subject to a consultation process actually with the educator unions and the school governing bodies. And they need to try to reach an agreement in terms of the amount of posts actually that is in the system, and in terms of how the HUD will distribute actually this post. This particular process must be finalized by the 30th actually of September, whereby the schools must receive the staffing establishments and start their planning with for effect actually of the upcoming year in that regard. Out of the provincial education departments, out of the 9 education departments, 3 departments have already actually finalized the current processes. As you know, actually, as the Western Cape, Free State has actually finalized theirs, as well as the Department of the Mapumalanga Education Department. So all at the moment, all the departments is actually busy with the consultation over the processes. Thank you, Minister. Siva?
Yeah, I'm going to talk to the current budget pressures throughout the provinces, and I'll deal with that per province. The total current budget pressures emanating from discussions that have been held with provinces, as the Minister mentioned. In total, we've got a minimum of 79 billion rand budget pressures, and that can move over to a maximum of about 118 billion, and that's for the years starting 21-22 financial year through to the 27-28 financial year. And just a breakdown, Eastern Cape, for example, their budget pressures cumulatively is 11.8 billion minimum. Free State is 7.7 billion. Gauteng is 20 billion. KZN has a minimum of 26.7 billion, moving over to about 38 billion. And the reason why we're showing minimums is that for some provinces, the information we got was not throughout up to 27-28. For example, Free State gave us information up to the year ending 26-27, meaning the year ending 31st March 2027. That's why we mentioned the minimum of 7.7 billion, but the maximum is about 9.7 billion. With KZN, for example, we said their minimum is 26.7 billion, but their maximum, if we push it through to the 27-28 financial year, goes up to 38.9 billion. Limpopo has a minimum of 546 million, but if we extrapolate that to 27-28, it goes up to 2.1 billion. Then Mpumalanga has a minimum of 4.3 billion, but if we push it through to the outer year of 27-28, it goes up to 17.2 billion. Then Northern Cape has got a minimum of 2.2 billion, and then the maximum is 8.5 billion. Northwest has got a minimum of 692 million with a maximum of 2.7 billion. And Western Cape has a minimum of 4.4 billion with a maximum of 6.3 billion. Yeah, so that's the extent of the budget pressures that have been presented to by provinces. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister, Mr. Faker and Mr. Kuno. Colleagues, we can now take questions here in the room as well as those on WhatsApp. Ishmael, do indicate to me if there's anything on the WhatsApp so we can start that. There's nothing for now. Okay, that's fine. Let's come back to the room. Any hands on the remarks by the Minister as well as the presentation by Mr. Kuno and Mr. Faker? Okay, Heidi, I see under your hand. Please go.
It's Heidi Jacos from ENCA. Sorry, if I could just ask for you to just repeat some of those figures because you were very low, so we couldn't really hear. I was trying to get your attention to just speak a bit louder. And then, Minister, I know that you've indicated that you called for a meeting with the Minister of Finance. I just want to ask in terms of whether or not you think this is going to be the only approach to deal with this. We know that the medium-term budget policy statement is going to be released on the 30th of October. But do you think that there is capacity in terms of your engagement so far with the Minister that there will be capacity for additional funding for the department? Thank you.
All right, thanks, Heidi. Do you want those numbers on record or you just want the figures for your own reporting?
I struggle to hear, so maybe if you could just repeat them. I don't know.
Okay. Mr. Kuno, please come back. Yeah.
He's not excited to say these numbers. He's not excited to say these numbers.
He's as depressed as the figures.
Yeah, I know. Apologies. I heard Elijah when I was sitting there that he wasn't speaking loud, so I thought that's how it goes. No. Let me start by saying the total budget pressures. We've got minimum and maximum. Total for all the provinces is 79 billion rand, and it's ranging from pressures which would have started in the year 21-22 projected throughout to the year 27-28, meaning 31st March 2028. That's why we say it's 27-28, because it's not a calendar year. It's a year that cuts through another year. So the minimum is 79 billion, as I said. The maximum is 118 billion. That is only up to 27-28. And the reason why we've got a minimum and a maximum is because not all provinces gave information ranging from 21-22 up to 27-28. So you'd have a province which gives you information up to 27-28 because that information is available. But then you'll have other provinces which give you information only up to, say, 26-27. Then one would have to project be conservative and project the next year or the following year's pressures, because obviously if you have a pressure this year, if you say I can't pay my salaries this year and my salaries are 1 million and we give you just 1 million, chances are you won't be able to pay salaries again next year. So if you say you've got pressures this year of 1 million, it means next year and the other year and the other year, you still have to pay those fixed costs like salaries. So that's why you've got minimum and maximum. So let me go province by province, minimum and maximum. Eastern Cape has projected up to 27-28, so there's no minimum and maximum. So their projection is 11.8 billion. Free State, their minimum is 7.7 billion, and the maximum is 9.7 billion. Gauteng, like Eastern Cape, have projected up to 27, 28. So they don't have a maximum and a minimum. So their projection is 20.5 billion. KZN has got a minimum of 26.7 billion and a maximum of 38.9 billion. Limpopo has got a minimum of 546 million and a maximum of 2.1 billion. Mpumalanga has got a minimum of 4.3 billion and a maximum of 17.2 billion. Northern Cape has got a minimum of 2.2 billion and a maximum of 8.5 billion. Northern Cape has got a minimum of 692 million and a maximum of 2.7 billion. Western Cape has got a minimum of 4.4 billion and a maximum of 6.3 billion. So in total, as I said, the minimum, the total minimum is 79.1 billion and the maximum is 118.2 billion. I hope I was more audible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Kuno. All right, now I see another hand. I think your audio was a real issue because now it has provoked another hand. All right, please proceed, Praga.
I was just wondering if Mr. Kuno can explain in a little more detail, some of the examples of the budgetary pressures that provinces are experiencing. I mean, can perhaps just break it down a little further.
Yeah, I suppose you need to ask specific questions because he gave a breakdown, so I don't know what you're looking for.
In terms of teacher provision, what is the breakdown for that? What is the breakdown for LTSM?
Okay, now it makes sense. Okay, that's fine. Let's go to the WhatsApp line, Ishmael.
Thanks, Chairperson.
Praga, please switch off. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one question from Tamakan Business Day. Minister, to what extent are provincial education departments trying to protect the poorest schools from these cuts, given that they serve communities that cannot afford to pay fees to help cover the cost of hiring extra teachers through the school governing boards? Thank you.
All right, that's fine. Thank you for that. Okay, seeing another hand now. Thank you. Please proceed.
Good morning. Raymond from Lieutenant Franklin. I just want a clarification. Is this the budget freeze that you spoke about is only for teacher position, or does it also cover other things like scholar transport and fees? Just want to be clear on that. And do you perhaps know if there's a breakdown per province, how many contract positions will be affected, and what is the vacancy rate per province if you won't be able to afford it, or because there isn't a budget for those positions? Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. Ishmael, back to you.
Thanks, Chair. There's a similar question to the previous one. Chevron Boysen, Cape Times. How many vacancies do we have nationally, and how many might not be filled due to the budget crisis?
All right, thanks very much. Yeah, Minister, please go first, and then perhaps Mr. Kuno. I think the other questions are for Mr. Faker. Thank you.
So, colleagues, as Mr. Kuno has stated, the budget shortfall for the education sector is sitting between just over 70 billion to 118 billion rand over the medium-term period. So that's what we are looking at with our projections if we continue with the current funding bracket. It's also important to note that these figures are not limited to just teacher provisioning. As Mr. Faker was here explaining about teacher provisioning, it's to explain the process around teachers, but this is across the board what provinces are working with. A question also was posed there about does this mean this will affect certain things? Well, compensation of employees for provinces comes from their equitable share. And then whatever it is that they receive from their equitable share, they spend on goods and services and other line items. But there are certain things that are ring-fenced that provinces, for instance, cannot touch, that are conditional grants. So things like school nutrition is a conditional grant, that it cannot be spent on other things. Things like infrastructure is a conditional grant that cannot be spent on other things. So these are budget shortfalls of what the provinces are responsible for providing, which they may not be able to provide unless we have some immediate and some short-term and longer-term solutions. Heidi asked the questions about, is the solution just the engagement with the finance minister? Heidi, this is an important question because, of course, Treasury is in itself working with a tight fiscal envelope. The real reason, the real solution to this funding crisis in the education sector is a government-wide reprioritization process. This is not something that DBE can do. This is not something that I think Treasury on its own can do. I think as a government, we need to sit and we need to figure out what is more important. And in my view, in a fiscal environment this tough, you have to prioritize things that matter the most. Teaching, healthcare, policing. When we talk about prioritization, we have to mean it. We are now, it's 5 to midnight, and we literally cannot fund things that are not critical. So that Heidi's question is an important one, is that is your engagement with Treasury enough? It won't be enough if government does not take a whole wide system approach of saying how do we prioritize the most important things in a country. And that's what we have to do for the next 3 years. And so the engagements now, Heidi, are really targeted at saying we need immediate solutions now as you head to the medium-term budget policy statement next month. There are certain things that we need an immediate solution on now. But when we're looking at the projections that the CFO has given us here, 118 billion is not going to arrive by simply moving things around. We're going to have to be brutal in how we prioritize as a government, not as DBE or as Treasury. As the South African government, we have to make a decision on what is more important to us. And I think that it's clear there are certain things that are more important. We got a question from Tamar Khan from Business Day. Excuse me. Sorry, colleagues, I am a little ill. What are provincial departments doing to protect the poorest schools? Well, that's why I indicated in my remarks earlier that we have to commend the provinces, because in my engagements with them, I'm currently in my listening and learning tour, which goes around the country in the different provinces. And I'm seeing how schools, firstly, are working hard to fundraise. I was recently in Limpopo, for instance, and I visited a school there whose name escapes me now. But they've done remarkable things to work around the current budget that they have. They are fundraising. They are doing things that are really, really commendable. So departments are working hard to try and make sure that they are protecting frontline services. But at the end of the day, those are small tinkering moves, which we must do. We must cut wasteful expenditure. We must guard against corruption. We must do all of these things. But we must also look at how do we as a government reprioritize. So I am happy that the provincial departments are doing a lot in their power to make sure that they're shielding frontline services. But they need help because the projections here are not looking good. And I've made a commitment to the provinces to say, while DBE is not responsible for budgeting and and really the rollout of education as a product, they have our support as DBE. Because ultimately, if my if my responsibility is policy making, education outcomes is also my responsibility. So I have to make sure that we're supporting the provinces as much as we can to protect frontline services. Thanks, Elijah.
Yeah, one question was a request for a breakdown of the budgetary pressures. I must just indicate that this is work in progress in the sense that even tonight we're having a HEDCOM meeting. HEDCOM in education is what in other departments they call HOD forum, where the DG will be meeting with the HODs of various provinces to drill down on these figures. And the reason for that is that, as the minister mentioned, there's a plan for us as a sector, the basic education sector, to have what we call a 10 by 10 meeting, a meeting with Medif Treasury. We won't know exactly what the figures are, and that's why we cannot give the figures. But all we can say is that it's a whole basket of issues, ranging from compensation of employees, which is normally, we call it compensation of employees, but it's salaries, examination-related activities, learner-teacher support material, or LTSM, mother tongue, bilingual-based education, leave gratuities, it's, school transport, training and induction of principals and teachers, school furniture, hostels, catering, printing, packaging, distribution of exam material, early childhood development, as well as municipal services, because in some provinces the pressures are such that they get to a point where it's difficult to pay your normal rates and taxes or your water and lights. Equally, the other question that came through as well was around how many vacancies are there nationally and provincially. We are not able to give that information now for the same reason. Thank you.
Thank you. There was a question with regard to the amount of contract people actually in the posts, with regard to educators. There's 18,729 contract appointments. It's as of the 31st of August. The other question with regard to the vacancies, but what I can add in terms of what actually the CFO said, is that there should not really be actually any vacancies within the system itself, for the main reason actually that the provincial education departments, once a post becomes actually vacant, they're either allowed to fill a post with regard to a substitute educator, or alternatively actually that they can fill that post in terms of a contract either until such time actually that they're in a position to actually advertise actually this post for it to be filled on a permanent basis. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Minister and colleagues. Any more hands, any more questions on the WhatsApp? Okay. Oh, there's a new hand at the back. Oh, okay. That's interesting. So let me start with you, Ishmael, and then we'll go to the back.
Thanks, Chair. Arthur from Heart FM in Cape Town. Could the Minister clarify what she meant when she said the teachers will not be retrenched?
All right. Thank you for that. Let's go back to network.
The minister spoke about immediate solutions. What are those immediate solutions and also the long-term solutions?
All right. Thanks very much. There's someone here. Can see you.
Thank you so much. Sakuma from DBE TV News. I just wanted to find out, it's almost the same as my colleague here, the issue of the solutions. What can be done, especially to ensure that teachers are not retrenched? Like you said, that they won't be retrenched, but where else can the money come from to to ensure that these budget cuts do not affect learning and teaching for a prolonged time in the sector? Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. Timorol.
Mine is more on the Bella bill about the process that has been put on hold over the next 3 months. Is there an update regarding negotiations that are happening behind the scenes? Thank you.
All right, thanks. Prega?
Basically, 2 questions. Obviously, today is the due date for the, announcement of the post establishment by the 9 provinces. And I see that 3 provinces have indicated they've finalized those, being Mpumalanga, Western Cape, and I'm not sure of the third. But just wanted to check regarding those 3. We know Western Cape has indicated 2,400 posts. The post basket would be reduced by that number. Any indication regarding the other provinces whether they are planning to reduce their post basket? And when will the other 6 finalize their post establishment? And then, sorry, the second question is perhaps unrelated, but just out of interest, wanting to know whether the South African Democratic Teachers Union has invited the Minister to today's National Congress, and whether she will be attending that.
All right, thanks very much for that. I think that's all for now. Minister, I'm going to ask you to please come again. Thank you.
I'll wrap up. All right, I'll wrap up, Elijah. I think I will be able to answer the questions that have been put. So, Heart FM asks, what do you mean that teachers will not be retrenched? What we mean by a reduction of a post basket, we mean that if there were vacancies that were created, either through resignation or people retiring, we are saying that the reduction of the post basket means that those posts will not be filled. So it does not mean when the Western Cape says 2,400 vacancies will not be filled, it does not mean they're going to be retrenching 2,400 teachers. So it's important that there's an important distinction, and we must be careful when we say that, because we don't want to cause mass panic. But be that as it may, not filling critical posts is in itself a problem that we have in the sector. We don't want to not fill critical posts. But the reduction of a post basket means that you are increasingly not filling those posts because of budget pressures. Does not mean you will be retrenching teachers. What are the immediate solutions and long-term solutions? Look, we are the processes that the CFO has laid out, our engagements with Treasury, my engagement with the Minister of Finance is important because there are certain things that we require in the immediate, in this current financial year. But the longer term solution that you speak of, so there's financial relief that we require in this current financial year. But of course, that's a process that Treasury must undertake. And it's very important for me to not step into their lane. The sector can make a case for additional funds, but Treasury ultimately has to decide. And we've got to allow them the space to be able to do that. So when I talk about immediate solutions, we need money in this current financial year to be able to resolve some of the issues we've spoken about. But in the longer term, I think when I was answering Heidi, what I was simply implying in saying that in the longer term, we've got to reprioritize government spending. It's the only solution. Where will you find 120 billion rand otherwise? So we've got to, as a government, say, where can we cut things that are not absolutely critical? Which government programs are not yielding impact? Which government programs are not absolutely critical? And we've got to then get rid of those and fund teachers and fund the future of 13.5 million learners in the system and 500,000 teachers in the system. I'm afraid it has to come down to that. You've got to think about nurses and teachers and doctors and police and teachers and learners versus other things. But that's a government-wide conversation that needs to be had. and I think I've answered where the money can come from. It can come from reprioritization. The issue around, I think the colleague there asked about the Bella bill and any update. As we know, the Bella bill now is the Bella Act with the suspension of the two clauses 4 and 5. And that process is now within the presidency, and they will be conducting, and the president is going to be leading the process of consultation on those clauses. But as far as the DBE is concerned, of course, the rest of the act has now been enacted and has been assented to law, and we've got to get ready to implement and start putting implementation plans for some of the provisions that are in the act that are important. So the suspension of the 4 and 5 clauses are being dealt with and led by the president. The DBE is now left with the remainder of the act to look at how can we implement that. And any indication of what the other 6 provinces will do, well, let's allow them to declare their posts. I think it's important. It's an important process because even the ones that have indicated to us, they've indicated to us. And it's important that provinces lead that process themselves because there's various consultations. Mr. Faker did indicate, I think, earlier that it's a cumbersome process. There's various consultations that need to take place. So let's give the provinces some time to be able to do that, especially in such a financially difficult environment. I think I'll end it there. Thank you very much, Elijah.
All right, colleagues, thanks very much. We're going to end it right there. As you can tell, the minister's voice is struggling. Thanks very much for attending. I know some of you have already made requests for one-on-one interviews and stuff like that. We'll handle that outside this process, but for today, let me thank you very much. We really appreciate your support. Have a great day.
Do I have a double